Burning sunlight and the pouring of cicada cries. Pitch black shadows were right underfoot. After having overslept, I was now headed to the usual place. Oh my god, who the fuck's talking to me that way? Okay. Morning. You're here late today. Okay, maybe I took that context a lot more harshly, but it just sounded so... Okay. Getting off the elevator, I exchanged light greetings with a nurse I became acquainted with. By now, even if I entered the 7th floor, no one challenged me. Oh, no one challenged me. Jeez. Just maybe, at this rate, I, too, might become a person in this place. Yikes, yeah, Setsumi. When the thought suddenly came, I was afraid. Yeah. Continuing down the White Hall, I headed to the now familiar room of Himeko-san. And when I returned to Himeko-san, who had probably been waiting... Books. Maybe? Right atop the bed, thin volumes that Himeko-san gazed at. What those were, I didn't know, but the face was different from her usual bright expression. With just that answer, her gaze once again returned to the pages. There was an expression I never saw before, a lonely and yet also somehow calm expression. Her words said so, but her face wouldn't turn this way. Even though she said it was boring, she continued staring with a lonely gaze. Then you don't have to look. Even as I thought that, I gazed along with her. There's nothing else to do, nothing else I could do. Right atop the bed, the maps of some place. On them were a number of large highways and roads, places with unfamiliar names. It felt like the slight to Himeko-san, who continued gazing, but for me, I couldn't find enjoyment in doing such. Even as she answered with that, Himeko-san continued the gaze. Himeko-san herself didn't know the reason, then there was no way I could understand. While thinking that, and just when I thought she would remain that way for a while, she slowly murmured. A map? Occasionally, Himeko-san spoke as if she could see clear in my thoughts. There were also times where she would suddenly toss out words like Zen riddles. What those were really talking about, I didn't know, but for some reason, often, I would wind up with nodding. Oh, you telling me Himeko-san started that? Oh. At the sudden question, I answered honestly. I never thought about such a thing. Ooh!
逆に言えば、それだけあれば、日本中どこだって行けるってことよ。
Even hearing that sum, to me, meant nothing. I also couldn't see the intention behind letting me hear it. Perhaps it simply meant that for Himeko-san, she had a place she wanted to go to, and someday I, too, would have such a one within me. Perhaps she also wanted to say that.
さて、じゃあ、またアイスでも行きましょうか。
With that, she folded the maps and stood.
私、検温あるから。 先に行ってて。
Leaving Himeko-san, I waited for the elevator. All around, I can see the pajama-wearing people of the 7th floor. People, I wonder if they have a place where they wanted to go to, like Himeko-san. Perhaps people of a certain age, from having already given up or taken a more philosophical view. Maybe they don't think about such things.
Setsumi-san.
No? Okay, that's fine. It was the helper who had spoken to me before. The other day, Himeko-san had been speaking with her. She was an acquaintance. With that word, I could make a guess at how things were. Before, Himeko-san said she had once been a helper on the 7th floor, that her family was Catholic and she had participated in public welfare activities. And for this younger sister to be a helper here in the same way was not surprising. Excuse me, Chihiro! What?
そんなことないわ。
Why is like the first thing you think of? Okay.
だったらいいんですが、以前は明るくて優しいお姉ちゃんだったんですけど。
Saying that, she sadly lowered her head a bit. Certainly, I also had a similar impression when we met the other day. At least, I thought her behavior towards this kind-looking younger sister seemed very cold. However, towards myself, there was no need of the had been. Even now, I believe she was kind.
千尋、何をやっているの？お姉ちゃん。前にも言ったわね。余計なことを喋ってる暇があったら、自分の担当の人をしっかり見るべきでしょ。うん、それは分かってるけど。あなたもヘルパーならば、自分の責務を全うしなさい。行きましょう、説明。
Ooh, cold as ice. Speaking unilaterally and then leaving her sister there, Himiko-san quite quickly walked ahead. Even as I felt somewhat bad for Chihiro, I followed after. Wonder what happened? Like, what did Chihiro do? Again, today sitting facing each other, we ate vanilla.
悪かったわね。変なとこ見せて。今の人が妹さん。ええ、そうよ。
While speaking, Himiko-san began eating her second ice cream. Beyond that, it didn't look like she was going to say any more, but I wanted to know more about her behavior, or just before. Also, are they literally just going to go eat ice cream like every day? Dude, like literally, it's like that's like, how many ice creams a week if she's eating 2? That's like 14 ice creams? Without a doubt, she was worried about Himiko-san.
どうしてあんなに？もしかして妹のこと？うん。
I gave a small nod. It was Himiko-san's own sister, and as someone who has been the same kind of helper before, I thought she would understand her feelings. Might not have been something an outsider should be interfering with, but still, I felt bad for the younger sister and was sorry for her.
あんなに優しくていい人なのに。そうね。優しくていい人だからよ。よくわからないわ。いいのよ。これもまだあなたには必要ないから。
Huh?
ただいま。
What? That's it? Like, dude.
おかえり。ちょうど晩ご飯の支度できた。お腹減ったでしょ。
うん。
With a nod, I handed over today's empty
はい、
lunchbox.
たくさん食べてね。
On top of the dinner table were a number of dishes. As always, the fried things from the part-time job were there.
ほら、またあげてきたわよ。
With that, she offered the plate of fries. Their slightly fat slicing was a distinctive feature. But today, the hand that held the plate was different.
お母さん。手。
ああ、大したことないわよ。やっぱり油使うからね。
Mother answered cheerfully as always, but those were the marks of a burn. It was slightly red. For, while beautifully painting with manicures, Mother would show them to Father and me with pride. That figure, happily excited over such a small thing, Father and I would look at each other and give a wry smile. And when she got a strange color, even when saying I was 10 years old too young, she also had painted my... But now it was different. The pink manicures had faded, and their place was slightly red skin of a rough and tan. Why had they become that way? The reason was easy enough to imagine. For whose sake they'd become that way, that didn't even take imagining. And exactly because of that, it was painful for me. Tortured me.
どうしたの？今日のもあげたてよ。
That isn't kind enough. All Himiko-san's words. I had a feeling I understood. Betraying good intentions, accepting lies, both were wrong.
ねえ、お母さん。
どうかした説明。美味しいわよ。まあ、ポテト担当になって少しはお母さんの腕も上がったみたいだしね。
With hands that were different from those days, but with a smile that was unchanged from those days, Mother happily offered the fries. But I'm such a mother. I could do nothing other than quiet. If I were to say the truth here, if I were to truly apologize, the person who was punishing, the person out there was somewhere. Would they relent? A few days later, with the sun shining directly overhead, I headed to the usual place. I heard that this summer was a cooler summer than average, but it still seemed like it was going to be a hot day.
おはよう。説明待ってたわよ。
For some reason, Himiko-san was again waiting in front of the hospital.
中庭。そうじゃないけど、まあ行きましょうよ。
With just that, she quickly started to walk towards the outside of the hospital.
ちょっと、どこ行く気よ。ほら、前にも言ったでしょ。残り3つのことよ。
Maybe 3. At first, I couldn't remember what she was talking
いい
about.
の。死ぬまでにしたい。 そうそう、残り3つのうちの1つなんだけどさ、ちょっと行って確かめてみたいことがあってね。
As she spoke, Himiko-san continued walking. Already, she was quite a ways from the hospital.
一体どこまで行くつもりよ。
結構遠いわよ。電車でも。
先生の外出許可は？
もちろん無断よ。
I didn't really understand it well, but even if it's Himiko-san, she was still a resident of the 7th floor. And I had the feeling that just up and leaving the hospital was going that far wasn't allowed.
大丈夫よ、そんな不安そうな顔しなくても。そりゃ外で見つかったらさすがに怒られるかもしれないけど、ちょっとくらいは多めに見てもらえるからさ。
After saying that much, she started walking away, or walking again. Was she being serious? Certainly, if you kept going this way, you should get to the train station. And then there was one other thing that nagged at me.
ところで、その格好のまま行くの？
Raised the simple question of how Himiko-san was dressed in pajamas. At the least, to ride the train, I thought that was a bad way to go about things.
もちろんこのままよ。このまま。
着替えないの？
いいのよ。これが私のユニフォームなんだから。
The sun up above cast short, dark shadows, and the unheating of the midsummer morning was lightly stepping Himiko-san. A while after, well, even saying that, only 5 minutes of walking around when the number of people walking on the street slowly increased. I wasn't too familiar with things, but it seemed that she was headed towards Station A. Certainly she had said it was 2 hours each way, but just how far was she planning on going? In just that amount of time, riding a train, it felt like you could get quite far.
ねえ、駅から
海までよ。正確にはパイナップルの木がある場所かしら。
パイナップルの木。
What is that I wasn't familiar with? I didn't know pineapple trees existed in the first place.
ほら、よく大きな建物の前なんかにさ、フェニックスって呼ばれている木があるでしょ。
うん、知ってる。
あれってさ、絶対にパイナップルの木だと思わない？
Indeed, they did look very similar, but is she talking about palm trees?
試しに切ってみて。ねえ、もし本当にパイナップルの木だったら大変よ。
I don't think pineapples grow on trees, though. Was she being serious? From a common sense standpoint, it had to be a joke. However, with Himiko-san's case, considering how she was normally it was impossible to tell.
何よ、その顔は。もしかしてバカにしてる？
そうじゃないけど、ありえないと思う。
もう、コロッケ博士のくせに頭が固いわね。何事も実際に試してこそでしょ。
博士、関係ないわよ。それにフェニックスの木だったら病院にもあるし、どこにでもあるじゃない。
ダメよ。もっと大物で試さないと面白くないでしょ。
Finally, we were about to just reach the station. Never mind that it was 10 minutes, walking under the blazing sky was unexpectedly difficult. And as I had expected, Himiko-san's pajama-clad figure stood out, and people walked by glanced at us.
ねえ、本当に行くの？
もちろんじゃない。そのためにここまで。隠れて。
どうしたの？
あれ、外科病棟の先生だわ。向こうは4階チーフの看護婦さんもいるし。
Now that she mentioned it, there were faces that I recognized.
そっか。病院の関係者はこの駅から通っていたのね。これじゃ見つかって怒られちゃうわ。
Himiko-san laughed in a carefree and sunny way, but there was no sense of planning or anything. In any case, surely she had been a helper before. She didn't know this?
だって私の家って近所だから電車で通ったことないんだもん。
私だってそうよ。
でもやっぱあれね。伊達にルールに含まれてないわね。
ルール？
いやいや、あなたには関係ないことだから。
それでどうするの？
そりゃ出直すに決まってるでしょ。
Quickly, the decision came, even though she had been so determined to go up until now. Perhaps if she really wanted to go, maybe after the morning rush ended, it seemed possible to get on the train without being... Maybe she had been serious to begin with. The sun was still high. Around now, the shops in the marketplace were opening up.
さて、せっかく駅前まで来たんだし、寄り道でもしますか。
As she spoke, Himiko-san wandered among the shops along the street. Looks like even though she gave up on riding the train, she didn't intend on going back to the hospital. Helplessly, I obeyed and followed after. As always, because of her pajamas, people would glance over. However, it seemed that Himiko-san didn't mind one bit. Eventually, her feet stopped in front of one storefront.
この服なんかいいわね。
She touched a number of clothes decorating the front of the shop, but they were all distinctly frilly of sorts of things. Wherever you looked, they were meant for cute girls. They didn't really seem to fit Himiko-san all that much.
そういうのが好きなの。
まさか私にこんな少女趣味ないわよ。
As I tried to understand what she said, she spread out the clothing in her hands in front of me.
似合うわよ、節美。
私
ほら、いつもセーラー服だけどさ、こういうのも似合うだろうって思ってたのよ。ね、買ってあげようか、このワンピース。
でも
遠慮しなくていいって、お姉さんからのプレゼントなんだから。
I don't want it. Would have been a lie. Someone who had only had a single sale uniform, it was a very tempting proposition.
姫子さんの服は
私は必要ないわ。だってこれがユニフォームだもん。
With that, she pointed at her own pajamas.
だったら私もいい。
あら、別に私に合わせる必要ないわよ。だってあなたはまだ選べるんだからさ。
While I wanted to reply, I swallowed my words. She spoke in her usual bright tone, but the words can still choose. I noticed the very heavy meaning in them.
やっぱり
残念ね。絶対似合うと思ったのに。まあ、気が変わったら言って。いつでも買ってあげるからね。
After that, we wandered around in the front of the station a while, ate ice cream together, and then headed back to the hospital. We found similar clothes in other shops. She continued to say she'd buy them for me. But in the end, I kept refusing. The daytime had become so hot and hazy, and now in the huge sky, the face of the moon peeked out. As usual, after eating dinner, I returned to my room and relaxed. At the window, washed and dry on the hanger, was the sail uniform. While gazing at it, I suddenly thought about the time I had gone to school. Right now, my health was good, so no one could forget, but in reality, I was someone who was admitted in and out of hospitals. Already over 2 years have passed since I'd been away from the place called school. In that time, I hadn't once thought about wanting clothes other than pajamas. There wasn't even any pressure for such a need.
でも今日は少しだけ心が揺れた。
Maybe it would have been better had I admitted I wanted. Himiko-san herself was stubbornly in pajamas, and being the only one to get new clothing made me feel bad. Besides that, no matter where Himiko-san was in her pajamas, she was dignified. Compared to that, I always felt somehow sorry. Like I'm somehow doing something embarrassing. Can't help it. Or maybe, mother, who had stopped getting manicures, red in her hand. Father, who continued the long commutes in the same suit. They saw me happily wearing cute clothes, perhaps to both of them, it would be a joyous thing. But that, for me, I think would have been difficult.
ポテトが嫌いということ以上に難しいと